Our guest this week grew up in Livonia, Michigan, earned a BSMA in mechanical engineering from Michigan State University, and an MBA from the University of Michigan. From 2011 to 2013, he was the president of Delphi Powertrain. And from 2014 to 2019, he was the vice president global purchasing for General Motors. And from 2019 to 2022, he was president of General Motors International. Since 2022, he's dedicated his time to the Kiefer Foundation as its chairman and founder. His name, Steve Kiefer. And I'm Jack Krasula, and this is Anything is Possible on 760 WJR. I'm Jack Krasula, and this is Anything is Possible. We're with Steve Kiefer. Since 2022, he's dedicated his time to the Kiefer Foundation as its chairman and founder. Steve, welcome. An honor to have you.
Thank you, Jack. It's a pleasure to be here.
Can we start by talking about your childhood, your mom and your dad, please?
Absolutely. I grew up in a very traditional middle-class family in Livonia, Michigan. My father was a Ford Motor Company employee all of his life, so we grew up in a Ford family, much to his dismay when I joined General Motors. But it was just a great childhood. I was the youngest of six, so I was the sixth child of a family that had just your traditional values. We went to public schools and had a great life playing sports, going to school, and living in a community that was really sort of warm and receptive.
Steve, what's the biggest thing you learned from mom, and what's the biggest thing you learned from dad?
Probably the biggest thing I learned from mom was compassion and the need to always focus on the positives. Try to find something good in everyone. Trying to find something good in everything that people do. From my father, it was clearly hard work. Dad was a military vet, which we're very proud of. He spent 7 years getting his engineering degree at night school at Lawrence Tech, and we still have a picture of me as a baby and him in his graduation cap and gown. So he had 6 kids while he was going to college to become an engineer, and I think we learned, hard work ethic and commitment from him.
Speaking of an engineering degree, you got a mechanical engineering degree from Michigan State. What's mechanical engineering?
Well, mechanical engineering traditionally was always everything to do with machines, so hard parts and machines as opposed to electrical engineering or chemical engineering. I grew up, in a Ford family, as I said, in a car family. So we worked on cars as kids. I worked in auto shop in high school, and I always had sort of a passion for automobiles and engines. So when I was going to school at Michigan State, I focused on mechanical engineering with a real focus on gasoline engines.
With all the time you spent at GM, did you ever give your mom and dad a General Motors product?
Yes. I got to admit, I never gave my dad one. He wouldn't. While he was accepting of me going to the other side, he never drove a General Motors product. My mother drove several of them, and her last car, it was the pinnacle of her life. She drove a Cadillac. So,
all right. For 30 years, you were with Delphi, and for 3 years, you were the president, Delphi Powertrain. What does powertrain mean?
Well, powertrain is taken on some different definitions, but it really, we define it as everything that propels an automobile. So it's usually the gasoline or diesel engine, or now the electric motor, the drive line, and all the associated parts that make a vehicle go.
Then you went over to General Motors, and you became vice president, global powertrain, for 2 years or so with General Motors, and then you became vice president, global purchasing. I mean, that's tall cotton. Talk about that chapter in your life.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. I had been a supplier actually for about 20 years, so I had a chance to work with all the major OEMs, the major car companies and truck companies around the world. So I had a really good sense as to how the best OEMs treat their suppliers. And when I came to General Motors to run powertrain, I was fairly vocal about some of the things that I thought we could do better in the way that we treated our suppliers at General Motors based on my experience. And there was one day where Mary Barra called me and said, well, do you want to do it? And I'm like, I've never been in purchasing in my life. I've never done that kind of work, but always up for a challenge. And it turned out to be one of the most rewarding jobs that I had in my career. Working for 5 years with 20,000 suppliers to General Motors, it was really a great experience. And I think because I had the experience from the other side of the table, being a supplier, I think it helped me figure out ways to put processes in place that would improve our supplier relationships.
Let's go back 40 years. You're still a student engineer, and you joined General Motors. Steve, talk about the electronics in a car in 1983.
Well, we were just coming through a period where we were moving from carburetors, if any of your listeners remember what those things are, and we were moving into electric fuel injection. So one of my first projects was on a little four-cylinder engine with one fuel injector and the electronics that control it. They were pretty minimal at the time, but that was the start of that period where we started emulating carburetor functions with electronics. And really, I was fortunate for about half my career to work as an engineer in that space. I was specifically in the space of engine development, but really the controls focused on emissions and fuel economy. So it was quite a great great thing to be involved with, but also to see the growth of it, because we went from very, very simple electronics and simple software to very complex products now.
Jumping 40 years, talk about the growth of, talk about the electronics in an automobile today.
Yeah, well, of course, now it's dominated by electronics, and of course, most people are starting to talk about the software platform that is an automobile. Some will even refer to it as it's an iPhone on wheels. I think that and it's creating all kinds of amazing opportunities, right? Software as a service, and trying to figure out how to make a better experience for the consumer based on software, based on apps, based on the things the vehicle can do for you for your entire life, not just for your transportation usage.
We're talking to Steve Kiefer. When we come back, we're going to ask him about the chapter of his life where he ran General Motors International. And I'm Jack Krasula, and this is Anything is Possible on 760 WJR. Welcome back to Anything is Possible. I'm your host, Jack Krasula. We're with Steve Kiefer. From 2019 to 2022, Steve, you were President General Motors International. Talk about that fantastic chapter.
Yeah, that was an amazing experience. Earlier in my life, I had 4 international assignments. So myself and eventually my family, we lived overseas for about 15 years in total on 4 different assignments. So I've always been sort of internationally minded. I actually, when I went to school at Michigan State, I did a semester in Germany, which kind of gave me a taste of international life. So when Mary Barra and Mark Royce asked me to run GM's international business, I was really quite excited. A real big P&L opportunity. Just for perspective, GM International is all of General Motors business outside of North America and excluding China. So we're in about 60 markets around the world, and we sell about 1 million vehicles annually in those 60 markets. So I was truly excited to take that on. I started on a really deep and involved travel experience. I had a commitment I was going to try to get to all 60 markets over a couple of years, and I had quite a schedule planned out. The November, December, January, February of 20 were just amazing travel schedules, and then something came along that closed us down. And when COVID hit and we all went home, I went ahead and ran GM International from my home in Northville, Michigan for the next 2 years, never left the country. So an amazing experience of trying to run a huge organization, internationally by Teams and Zoom calls.
The big three had the rush to EVs. It's been disappointing. Why?
Well, I think that, there were some good ideas there. I think, clearly EVs have a role, and I think they're, eventually going to be good for the environment. I think any time that we over-subsidize something to try to change consumer demand, it's probably a red flag. So, terms like 50% EV penetration in North America by 2030, I just could never imagine that there really was a plan to get there. And of course, the way it was being done was through, huge government subsidies, not just on the consumer side, but also on the investment side with the automakers and the suppliers. Just one data point, one of the consulting firms that I work with has said that if there were no subsidies, the natural penetration of electric vehicles by the end of the decade would be 15%, not 50%. So I don't think the EVs are a bad idea. I just think that we're a bit too ambitious. We didn't have and we don't have a good infrastructure plan to keep up with that kind of growth. And we also have an issue that we haven't gotten to the scale or the cost effectiveness that these EVs are profitable to the levels that the gasoline and diesel engine vehicles are profitable. So I think there's a few, I think we will get there. There will be more EVs. The growth is quite significant, but I just think we have to be realistic about how large the penetration will be and how quickly we'll get there.
Toyota went hybrid. Now, I believe that a hybrid has 1,850 more parts than an EV, but where do you see hybrids fitting in?
I think hybrids are a great interim solution, and not just because I think so, but the market's asking for them. They do offer significant fuel economy benefits, and they address the one big concern that consumers have, which is charge anxiety, range anxiety, or the time it takes to charge an EV. So with the hybrid and having an internal combustion engine to propel the vehicle when you run out of battery, I think it's really a good solution for the interim, and certainly a good solution when, in this period where we don't have infrastructure to support all of the EVs that have been sort of discussed.
All right, let's switch gears.
Sure.
God blessed you with 4 children. From 2012 to 2016, Mitchell went to Catholic Central. Quite an impressive career at Catholic Central. Talk about those days in Mitchell at Catholic Central.
Yeah, Mitchell was asked during one of our summer home visits from living in Europe. We were home for the summer, and one of the coaches at Catholic Central asked if he would come and take some shots, and eventually asked if he would join the team. I said a couple of times, we live in Europe. This kid can't play for Catholic Central. How's that going to work? And when Mitchell found out that they wanted him at Catholic Central, he asked if he could move back and join Catholic Central, which kind of shocked me. But I said okay, and once Mitchell said that, all his brother and his sisters wanted to do the same. So that was really the impetus for us to move back from Europe to Michigan, and actually the impetus for me to join General Motors, oddly enough. But back to Mitchell, he had a great career. He found a school that was academically challenging for him, which he needed because he was a really smart kid, but he was a little bit disorganized, and it really put discipline into his studies. And then from a hockey standpoint, Catholic Central has 4 hockey teams, a prep team, a low JV, a high JV, and a varsity team. And Mitchell is one of the few kids that played on all 4 of them. He rose through all 4 teams and ended up on the state championship team when he was the goalie on the state championship team when they won the state championship in 2016.
All right. He also was a pretty good salesman.
He was, so he graduated with a 4.0 grade point and was a great student. But he was always just passionate about whatever he took on, whether it was, bike riding or collecting tennis shoes or whatever. But he found himself selling Cutco knives in the spring and summer of 2016, and he just took it on with a passion. And for your listeners that don't know what Cutco knives are, they're sort of they call them the best knives in the world. In reality, what they are, it's a marketing firm that really helps young people sell a product, and they use it's a great product, but it also uses the revenue from the product to help the kids pay their way through school. So Mitchell was so passionate about it, he actually set the company sales record in July of 2016. This boy sold $54,000 worth of Cutco knives in a 3-week period, and to this day now the annual sales trophy is known as the Mitchell Kiefer Sales Award, because he still holds the record, and he broke the previous record by like $20,000. The previous record was like $30,000, and he sold $54,000 worth of knives. So he was extremely passionate and really good at it.
All right, we're talking to Steve Kiefer. God had different plans for Steve Kiefer.
Hmm.
And when we come back, we're going to talk about September 19th, 2016, and God's plans. And I'm Jack Krasula, and this is Anything is Possible on 760 WJR. This is Anything is Possible. I'm your host, Jack Krasula. We're with Steve Kiefer. Steve, Mitchell started at MSU in August of 2016 studying neuroscience. September 19th, 7:50 in the morning. Please.
Yeah, so it was a beautiful Monday morning. Mitchell had come home for the weekend to go to a Lions game on Sunday, and he got up early and he was driving back to school for a 9 o'clock class. As you said, it was 7:50 in the morning. The weather was perfect. The sun was out. No reason to have any kind of issues on the road. Traffic slowed down on I-96 near Ingham County. Mitchell slowed down, and unfortunately, the young lady behind him was on her phone. She was on Snapchat, and she did not slow down. So she hit Mitchell at about 82 miles per hour, which that alone probably wouldn't have been, that wouldn't have killed him. But he was hit from behind and driven across a very narrow strip of grass on 96 into oncoming traffic, where a large truck and trailer hit him and killed him instantly.
How did you find out?
It wasn't till the end of the day. I actually remember it like it was yesterday. I was driving home from work from General Motors, and I got a frantic call from my daughter, Juliana. Jules, as we call her, was 16, and she had just gotten her driver's license in her first car in May. So with how frantic she was, I was quite certain that she was in a crash. I could tell by how distraught she was, and I just tried to keep her calm and say, please tell me. And then she started saying Mitchell, 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 and I was like, what about Mitchell? And she said he was in a crash, and you have to come home. And I said, well, I'm on my way. But then I'm thinking, I know he's in East Lansing, so I was trying to calm her down to say, I'm not coming home. I'm going to go to East Lansing if he's in a hospital or something. And I'm like, where is he? What's going on? And she really couldn't get the words out. And then I heard in the background that someone, that my wife at the time said he died. And of course, I'm on the highway trying to hold the steering wheel, just knowing that something horrible's happened. And of course, the phone went dead at that point. So I just tried to grip the wheel and keep my thoughts about me as I drove home to get the news from the police officer that was at the house.
How did you and the family get through that first month, Steve?
I wish I knew. It was it's in some ways it's very vivid to me still. In some ways it's just a dark cloud. One thing I know is the very next day I took the girls out to his two sisters, and we went to the disc golf course. Mitchell loved disc golf, so we went to the disc golf course and just kind of tried to relive his steps and walk his steps and talk about him. But one of the things that I had a good friend who lost a child, and it really destroyed his life. And we talked a lot about that. We talked about, are we going to let this destroy us, or are we going to let us use this to sort of redefine what we do in life and do something meaningful in honor of Mitchell? And of course, that's an easy decision. It's hard to do, but it's an easy decision. So we decided that we needed to do something in Mitchell's honor. And it was really within that first week that we thought about this idea of a foundation. And, I must say, as a automotive guy all my life, I knew the dangers of distracted driving. I knew the dangers of road safety, but I never knew just how dramatic it was, and obviously how impactful until it happens to you. So in those first couple weeks of me studying, just how big this problem was, it became very clear to me that we had to do something, and we started the Kiefer Foundation the following month.
Speaking of suddenly it happening to you, if there's a listener tonight that's just lost a loved one from a sudden tragedy, what do you say to that person?
Yeah, it's tough. I'd love to be able to say it gets easier. I mean, it's a hole in your heart, as we say, that will never go away. But I think we all need to figure out how to deal with our grief, and everyone does it in a different way. Some people go quiet and keep it all in. I won't judge what the right thing to do is. What I would say is, trying to find meaning, trying to find purpose, trying to do something that makes you feel good that you're honoring the memory and the legacy of your lost loved one. for me, that gives me peace. That gives me strength. That gives me peace, and it makes me feel like when I know we're saving lives, it makes me feel like his loss was not just for nothing.
You don't hate God. Why not, Steve Kiefer?
Well, it's a good question. The day after we lost him, I sat with Father Huber from Catholic Central and asked the same question. I mean, how could God do this? How could God take Mitchell away? And he had a couple of things to say. First of all, he didn't give me the speech about this is God's plan. He basically referred to it as just a horrific accident, which kind of surprised me. But then what he said that sort of made me feel better is he described for me how he thought Mitchell was what Mitchell was experiencing that day, his first day in heaven. And he just described how, think about Mitchell knows everything now. He sees everything. He knows everything. All the things, all his curiosity has all been answered because he's with God. And you'll see him, it'll seem like a long time, but you'll see him, in sort of a blink of an eye in the time of eternity. So that kind of made me feel good. And the last thing he said is you just have to believe and you have to trust that Mitchell is as happy as he could ever be where he is. So the only people that are not happy are the ones that don't get to share it. We're sad for ourselves because we don't have Mitchell. And I guess when I thought of it that way, I thought, well, if I knew and if I know for sure that he's good and he's happy, then I can sort of live with it and wait for that time that we'll be together again.
You now know for sure, Steve Kiefer, that your life's mission is to end distracted driving. How did you come to realize that?
Well, Mitchell was a bit of an old soul, and I think he had a lot figured out for an 18-year-old young man. He always said that he wanted to change the world. He wanted to do something amazing to change the world, and we were sure, just based on that knife selling experience and his scholastic experience and his start at Michigan State, we knew he would. I can't even imagine what he'd be doing today. But when I thought of that, I thought, okay, I have to do something to change the world, with his help. And I do feel like he's with us every day on this journey. So I think that was really it. It's, we know that we have to do something to honor him. We know how big the problem is. I know how painful this is for the people it happens to. And by the way, I mean, in this country, 120 people will die today in traffic crashes. So, and about almost 4,000 around the world. So every day I think about those families, and if we can save 1, 2, 3, 10, 50 of them, what we've really done for society. So that makes us feel good, and that really keeps us focused on the mission.
For a number of years, you were at the highest level within General Motors, reporting directly to Mary Barra. At a very young age, in February of 22, you go to her and say, Mary, I'm going to retire. Why?
Well, honestly, we spoke earlier about General Motors International, and it was an amazing job, but there was something else going on, around that time frame. The world was getting through COVID and opening up again. And, what I found, first of all, the international experience was fantastic in being able to turn that part of the business around, because we hadn't made money for several years in our international business, and we were able to become profitable during the COVID period, which I was very proud of. But the other thing that was happening is, as the world was opening up, the travel was starting again. And what I found is I was going to be on the road probably 3 weeks out of every month. And I was thinking, how do I do all these things that I've been able to do for the foundation while I was working from home? It was much more, it was much easier to do that. I thought that there's just no way I'd be able to keep the momentum in the foundation and travel the world for General Motors. So I had that discussion with Mary Barra and Mark Royce, and they couldn't have been more supportive. They're both amazing leaders. They're both focus on life missions, and they know what my life mission is, and they couldn't have been more supportive in helping me retire. But also, I got to say, the General Motors team is just amazing with us every step of the way as we're trying to get laws passed around the country. So I can't say enough good things about the GM team and how they supported me through Mitchell's loss and through my retirement.
And also, WJR has been a huge support team for you as well. We're talking to Steve Kiefer. When we come back, we're going to ask him more about the Mitchell Kiefer Foundation. And I'm Jack Krasula, and this is Anything is Possible on 760 WJR. I'm Jack Krasula. This is Anything is Possible. We're talking to Steve Kiefer. If you want to learn more, www.mkiefer, Kiefer.org. mkiefer.org. You threw out some numbers. How big of a problem is distracted driving?
Yeah, so let me recite a few more numbers that unfortunately roll off my tongue quite simply. First of all, the biggest number: 1.35 million people get killed on the roads of the world every year by automobiles. Those aren't all distracted, but that's the largest number. When you bring it to this country, it's about 42,000 people were killed last year in this country, and again, that's all car crashes in total. When it comes down to distracted driving, it's really interesting because the stats will say things like 9 or 10 people each day. But the reality is, the way this is documented is police officers are required to, ask and make an assessment at the scene of the crime or the scene of the crash. And the reality is they're way underreported. So most experts, and I've met a lot of experts in this, if we can call it this industry, most people would agree that the number is closer to 50%. So what does that mean? If it was 50% of 42,000 people, that would literally be 60 people each day killed by distracted drivers. And that's just a staggering number.
All right. You spend every day going to state after state, Steve, to convince lawmakers to put in place laws to stop distracted driving. That seems to most people that I talk to, that's a no-brainer. It's got to be so easy to do. Not so?
No, it really isn't. I mean, first of all, I think it even surprised. I was with an international audience recently, and they were surprised to learn that traffic laws are state laws in this country. So any law you want to get passed, you got to do it 50 times, once in every state. And then the second thing is, I mean, there's just not general awareness, and I think in a lot of these states there's a lack of awareness, maybe a lack of motivation, but worst of all, I'm finding in a lot of states there's political games being played. So, I'll just tell you, in this state of Michigan, our home state, which, I made a priority from the start of this, it took us 5 years to get the law passed that went into effect in June of last year. And I would say in every state we see a similar trend. We get pushback. We get people questioning whether it's really important. We get people saying it's government overreach. Civil liberties are being violated. Don't tell me what I can do in my car, which of course are all really, really bad arguments. I mean, every developed nation in the world, it's illegal to hold a phone while you're driving an automobile. Yet we've still got now 19 states left that allow that here in the U.S.
In 2023, Michigan was the 26th state that you got it passed. And you made a statement just now. Took us 5 years in Michigan?
Yep, 5 years.
No way.
Yep. And I will tell you that then candidate Whitmer, because it was, when I first met her, it was before she was even elected the first time, she committed to me. She took Mitchell's bracelet. She hugged me. She cried with me, and she committed to getting it done. So, I can't blame it on the governor. She tried, but there were a lot of political games being played. And that was the thing that was most disappointing, is to see people that, literally didn't want to get a law passed because they didn't want our governor to have something successful when she was running for her second term. And of course, she won that second term. So that was really the disappointing thing, is, you think when you've got the governor behind you, it's going to be smooth sailing. And, she and I would talk regularly about it, and she'd say, Steve, I'll do anything that you want, but the more I'm vocal about it, the more the Republicans push back. And I don't want to make this partisan at all. Unfortunately, it is. And that was the biggest shock to me, is because, I can't imagine people that are in the debate about abortion or gun control or even marijuana. These are very controversial topics. Who out there is opposed to safe roads? I mean, it's just shocking to me that we get this much pushback. But the reality is there's a lot of pushback, and it's a slow process.
A couple of segments ago, you talked about the electronics and all of this. It's a computer. This car is a computer. We spend all this money, technology, on, airbags, et cetera, et cetera. Have the big three the OEMs, tier ones, have they helped you in this mission?
Yeah, I would say in several ways. First of all, I got to compliment the auto industry for some of the innovation you just mentioned. I mean, airbags, seat belts, emergency braking, these ADAS systems. These are all tools that are making the automobile safer. And then also I mentioned General Motors, but I should also mention the others. I mean, not just the U.S., but the Japanese and German automakers have helped us in this cause to get legislation passed and supported us in all the foundation activities. So there is a fair amount of support. There's a couple things I would mention. I mean, there's more technology that could be available right now and could be deployed that would help improve the problem. And then the second thing is for the technology that is deployed, it's shocking how many people are not using the new technology. All of our new vehicles have some form of connectivity, whether it's Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, or Google Assistant. But how many times do you still see people in brand new cars with the phone to their ear? I mean, there's just no reason for that in this day and age. There's also these do not disturb modes on your iPhones. If people would just use the tools that are available, we'd be in a better place. And then, of course, if we could get support for more effort and more deployment of this technology, I think we can eventually solve the problem.
We're talking to Steve Kiefer. If you want to learn more, www.mkiefer.org. Steve, ever since September 19th, 2016, your entire family, their lives was changed forever. Mitchell was hit by a young lady, 20 years old, from Flint, going back to central Michigan. That family life has been changed dramatically as well. Did you ever meet her?
Yeah, I did. I met her on the day of sentencing. Her attorney approached me, and her attorney was actually a hockey guy. He knew Mitchell. We had sort of mutual friends. He was a great guy. He approached me and he said, would you be willing to meet her? It would really mean a lot to her and the family if you did. And probably the hardest thing I ever did in my life. But yeah, I agreed to meet her. Her parents walked her over to me. She was, hysterically trembling as her parents kind of held her and walked her to me. And I still don't know how it happened, but as she approached me, my arms sort of fell open and she fell on my chest and just, again, cried hysterically. And I just kind of held her for a moment. And again, it's just, I don't know how I did that, but that was our one and only meeting. Yeah.
Forgiveness. Being bitter is like me taking poison in the hope that you die. So there's a lot of people that have had a tragedy happen to them, and they hate another human being because of that. They despise them. What do you say to those people?
Well, it is a poison, and I think we all need to figure out how to reach deep and forgive. I don't know that I've ever used the word forgive, but I will tell you when the attorney approached our family and said, the maximum penalty here is going to be time in jail. We asked to learn more about her, and she by all measures she was a good kid, just another college student working 3 jobs, good Christian family, trying to get through school. And I thought, who among us has not looked at their phone? I mean, here I was probably one of the worst culprits of this before this happened to me. Who among us hasn't looked down at our phone when we're on the highway? And it only takes a second, and unfortunately she did it at the absolute wrong second. So when I learned all that and just learned how remorseful she was and her family was, I thought, it doesn't do anybody any service to put her in jail. I hope that at some point she'll find the strength to be a vocal supporter on the same kind of stuff that we're working on to end this horrible epidemic. We're not there yet, but that's the closest thing I can say was my forgiveness.
Steve Kiefer, the name within the automotive industry, is universally known. You ran GM Purchasing. It's an iconic name. You got a phenomenal reputation. Someday you're going to meet God. He's going to tell you the 6 greatest words, well done, good and faithful servant, and you're going to see your son Mitchell. What are you going to say?
Sup, Mitch?
I chuckle when I say that, because that's what we always used to say when we'd see him. It was like, "What's up, Mitch?" was our phrase. "Sup, Mitch." It'll just be a wonderful period. I can't wait to ask him about how he felt about all this, because we often talk about it. People say, well, what do you think Mitchell would think as he's watching you do all this? I think he'll be very proud of us, but I think he's very embarrassed as well that, he never would want this kind of spotlight, he's kind of the face of distracted driving now, and I don't think he would ever want to be that, but I think he will be very, very thankful for the work that we did, and I can't wait for that day.
Many people have told you, Steve Kiefer, thank you for this mission. Your son will tell you, thank you, Dad.
I hope so.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Please join us next week. And until then, I'm Jack Krasula. Thanks for listening, and make it a great week, because with God, anything is possible. Spohom.